Welcome back. You are a rock star. You already completed 1/4 of the training modules. Let's keep that momentum going. Before we start this module, please make sure you have the operational guide in front of you. Here's that link again in case you need it. We will be referring to the guide frequently throughout the module. In this module, we're going to talk about when it may or may not be appropriate to use a PSA, and what population specifically the PSA should be used with. Prior to completing the PSA, you need to confirm that the PSA is appropriate to be used. The PSA is not intended to be used on all populations. Please turn to page 4 of the operational guide, which highlights this information. The PSA assessment is intended to assess the risk of new criminal activity, or NCA, new violent criminal activity, or NVCA, and failure to appear, or FTA, for adult defendants who have been arrested in the community and are awaiting the disposition of their cases. Remember, these were the PSA outcomes in Module 3. It seems pretty straightforward, but let's take some time to review when the PSA may or may not be appropriate to be used. The table on your screen can be very helpful when trying to determine when it may or may not be appropriate to use the PSA. Okay, let's go through a few of these scenarios together.
Is a PSA appropriate to assess adults arrested in the community and booked into the jail?
Yes, the PSA is intended to be used only for adults and only for people who are not already incarcerated at the time of the offense.
Is a PSA appropriate to assess adults arrested in the community and not booked into the jail?
No, the PSA was developed to assess adults who have been arrested in the community, booked into jail, and are pending the disposition of their cases. In Wisconsin, this includes 17-year-olds.
Is a PSA appropriate to use for anyone 17 and older in Wisconsin who is booked into the jail on new charges?
Yes, a 17-year-old is considered an adult for criminal purposes in Wisconsin, and a PSA may be completed. However, make sure you don't use any information from juvenile records when collecting data.
Can I use the PSA on anyone under 17 and waived into adult court in Wisconsin who was booked into the jail on new charges?
Yes, a PSA may be completed in this situation. However, again, you should never use the juvenile records when scoring the PSA.
Is a PSA appropriate for people who are charged with a new offense while already in jail or prison?
No, the PSA should not be completed for defendants who are incarcerated and are charged with a new offense, such as assaulting an officer or another inmate.
What about someone who was arrested on a failure to appear warrant and held in jail?
Yes, the PSA is completed on someone who is arrested on a failure to appear warrant. As a PSA assessor, you will need to familiarize yourself with when it is or is not appropriate to use a PSA. In order to do this, you will want to take a few minutes to familiarize yourself with the frequently asked questions identified in the operational guide. Let's see if you have this straight. Please answer the question on your screen. The PSA may be completed on A. Someone who is 17 years old arrested for a charge and booked into the jail. B. An adult arrested in the community and booked into the jail pending disposition of their case. C. Someone incarcerated and charged with battery to a jailer. D. A 16-year-old waived to adult court. E. All of the above. Or F. A, B, and D. If you picked F, you answered correctly. A PSA is not meant to be scored on someone already incarcerated who is charged with an offense. Great job! If you didn't answer this correctly, no worries. Just take some time to review the information in the operational guide. Although the information we covered may appear to be straightforward, there are several scenarios that require further explanation. If you run into a questionable situation, you should be able to find an answer in the frequently asked questions section of the operational guide. If you have a question you cannot find the answer to in the guide, you might want to check the Advancing Pretrial Policy and Research, or APPR, website at the following link. Now that you have determined the PSA should be completed and you are preparing to score a PSA, you will need access to several types of data located in various record systems. The data used to score these risk factors are typically obtained through a comprehensive criminal history inquiry involving local, state, and national criminal history databases your county has access to. Your county should have specific policies and procedures involving permissions for accessing this kind of data. Staff who complete the PSA must be familiar with local and state-level nuances when researching criminal convictions. They must also learn how to analyze data from other states through the National Crime Information Center, or NCIC. Criminal history records can be difficult and confusing to interpret without appropriate training. Staff completing PSAs should be trained on how to query and interpret criminal history data, including NCIC data, and obtain necessary clearance to access this type of information. Some of the data you will work with will include adult criminal histories, adult court appearance history for criminal cases, and data related to charges potentially carrying a penalty of incarceration. You might run across data or other records which should not be used to score the PSA, including juvenile records, civil traffic violations and ordinance violations, any self-reported information, such as from an interview, and expunged records. This information seems like it should be simple enough. However, the pretrial pilot sites came up with several scenarios that needed further explanation, such as, what do you do if NCIC is not available? What happens if a person already has a PSA? And many other questions. The pilot sites worked diligently to put any questions they might have had into the operational guide. Please refer to the operational guide for specific answers to questions you may have. Again, if you are unable to find your answer in the guide, please consult the Advancing Pretrial Policy and Research APPR website at the following link. Even though an automated system will be calculating the risk scores of the PSA, it is helpful for you to know how the PSA is scored. We reviewed this briefly in Module 3. Let's go into a bit more detail. Points and weights are used to score the PSA, but don't worry, you won't have to learn to do this yourself, as the PSA should not be hand-scored. The expectation from the Arnold Ventures is that the score shall be automated to reduce the likelihood of calculation errors. The tables on page 6 in the operational guide explain how different questions are weighted and scored. Again, these are provided for information only, and calculation must be automated using a designated case management system or software tool. When looking at risk factors related to the PSA, there are the 9 risk factors and also risk factors that are merged to predict NVCA and predicting FTA and NVCA. As can be seen in this chart, the PSA merged risk factors that affect the score are age at arrest and current violent offense, NVCA, and prior misdemeanor or felony convictions, FTA and NVCA. Typically, these merge factors will be auto-calculated for you. We have covered a lot of information in modules 1 through 4. Don't worry, once you start putting what you've learned into practice, it will come back to you. Now that you have learned about the history of the PSA and when it is appropriate to use the PSA to assess someone, let's start moving through the 9 PSA risk factors in the next module.